Welcome back, everyone. This is our Agentic Engineering series. I'm back with Alberto, and we're here to talk about something that's a little bit different from our other topics. We're trying to explore the entire space here of Agentic Engineering and figure out what all this stuff means and like what the limits are. And part of that is not being maximally hype driven, but rather just being like, hey, let's figure out what the limitations of these things are too, because they do have limitations. That's just a real thing about them. And Alberto wrote a wonderful blog post about him running into limitations and learning from that experience, not coming in as somebody who's like a super AI skeptic, but somebody who's coming in like actually genuinely really trying to use it for as much as he could, and then running into limitations and what he did about that. So I don't want to steal your thunder. Alberto, do you want to introduce yourself and just kind of give a little bit about
Yeah.
your background, and we can go through your post?
Yeah. Hi, Richard. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So I'm a software engineer, been a software engineer for 15 years. I specialize in full stack web development. And in the last few years, I've moved into being a bootstrap entrepreneur and I've built a few SaaS products. And that's where the issues with AI started.
Yeah, I think you said you had like 15 years of experience, something like that.
Yeah.
So you're definitely a seasoned programmer. Like you know what
Yeah,
you're
of course,
doing. But
yeah.
also I think you mentioned to me at some point that you really came into this being like, I want to just try to use AI and get the most out of it that I can. You were very like optimistic and like eager to to try
Yeah.
things out.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to make this clear because it might sound like I'm against AI by the blog post. But I'm really wishing that it's as good as they say it is. I really want it to be good. I've been using it since 2022 when GitHub Copilot came out of the technical preview, and I was using it was just an autocomplete at the time, and I was really excited for it, and then I've been using it since. So I really put everything into it and just like treating as like it was the solution. So I'm very open-minded and I love being an early adopter as well. So yeah, that's kind of the where I started from.
Okay, great. Well, let's actually take a look at the blog post. For those who want to sort of follow along at home, I'm going to share my screen here so you can just kind of see the post. I got it pulled up right here, so we can sort of talk through it. We don't need to go through every paragraph, obviously, but just sort of like just to give people context on the rest of the conversation. What we're going to be talking about is based in part on this experience. So, do you want to just sort of talk through at a high level, like what the experience was, what what went wrong, what your conclusions were from it, and so forth?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working on a SaaS that deals with a lot of data, and I've got a lot of business customers that have been increasingly asking for more and better data. And working with the PHP and MySQL, if I'm sure many people in watching the live stream have got experience with it. They are great, but up to a certain level, it comes to a point where they reach their limit. So I've started looking into what can I use and what are the big boys using. And I saw, I remember reading about Golang a lot on like Hacker News. So I started using ChatGPT at the time to ask it what's the best languages. So I came out with using Go and ClickHouse, and it turns out ClickHouse is amazing as a database for time series data as well. So it's really exciting. I'm gonna have my infrastructure for hopefully the next 10 years. So I started making a plan. I was chatting with O1, I think at the time, then O3 Mini came out at the end of January. So yeah, this is like beginning of the year. And I started first taking into account what's my current infrastructure, making sure I really have a good MD document with everything that I've got right now, and then my desired outcome, what I want this to become. So there's a lot of planning involved. I make a lot of diagrams. I made sure to have a good idea and understanding of what I wanted to do first and foremost for myself, and then also because I knew that if I could give that to the AI, then it will give me hopefully great results. So I started working with it. I started building this new Go application, and things were really good, and I was really happy with it. Of course, I didn't know a lot of the code that was coming out. Like I do have some understanding of Go from knowing C and Java, so it's not like it was all gibberish to me. And also by being a programmer, you understand what code does, even if you don't know the programming language.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, it came to a point where I started hitting a problem. I was like, I feel like I'm a week away from fixing this, but actually a new small error would come and then that will take like another 2 weeks to fix. So this started happening for a while, and then I will give my error output to the LLM, and then it will spit out something new that will kind of fix it, but also make things a bit more messed up and also break something else. So it came to a point where like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, what's going on here? So I kind of stopped everything. Like, I'm not going to use AI today. I'm just going to sit down. Let's actually open the files one by one and see what this LLM has built. Because I think there's a level of discomfort as a developer using AI heavily for the first time because you're not in control anymore. It's kind of like you're giving to another developer access to your code base, but it's only you. So you're kind of working with someone else, but you're not. So that's kind of the feeling that I had. So coming into it, it did feel a little bit uncomfortable having all this code written and without knowing 100% that every single line of code. But I just thought, well, I don't know Golang, so I need to learn. So I'm sure this is just because I'm not experienced in it. But yeah, it came to a point where I started doing an actual code review, and yeah, there's like, as I say in the blog post, like the horror ensues because I was I was really shocked at the poor quality of some things, and it was not just about bugs and features, not working. I think as a developer who wants to maintain this code base for the next few years, I also care about it being neat enough. I don't expect perfection, but at least some level of neatness that I would expect from like even a junior developer that was not there. So yeah, that's where kind of my reconsideration started.
Okay, so let's pause and talk about the story up to this point because this is something I have totally had this experience. I know exactly what you're talking about here. Like the things that really jumped out to me where you talked about like you're sort of building, right? You had this like phrase, like I've definitely seen people talk about this feeling of like intense productivity, like I'm getting so much done, and maybe not totally like taking stock or even necessarily being aware of like what's going on under the hood. And maybe if you could get building, and you get all the way to like it completely succeeds and it's beautiful and it works great and it runs fast and everything is wonderful, then maybe it doesn't matter if you're peeking behind the scenes. The problem is that you start like what was it? You said the cracks start to show, right? You feel like you're really close and you just find another issue and it sets you back. And you find another issue and it sets you back. And what became apparent to me when I've had this experience, and tell me if this resonates with you, is I had this mental model of how good the software was that I was building in this really fast sort of, just kind of checking stuff, but not really looking that closely at the code way. I thought I was this close, but actually there were all these problems that I just missed. I just had no idea how far away I actually was. Like there's that old joke of like, the first 90% of the code takes you the first 90% of the time, and then the last 10% takes you the other 90% of the time. Like it's like it's like that type of thing felt like it was really amplified when I was trying this out. And the last time I tried this, which actually was with Claude 4, I was building something and I was like, okay, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to get to something that works. And I experimented with doing this same kind of strategy, barely looking at the code. And in the end, I ended up throwing it all away. I mean, it was like multiple days worth of like trying to do this because I was in exactly this state. It's like, it's not quite there. It doesn't quite do what I need it to do. And I feel like telling the model to try to fix the things that it has made is just, it feels like I tell it to fix one thing and it breaks another thing. And like, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I'm not even sure if it's 1 step back. It might be 3 steps back. Does that resonate with you based on this experience?
Yeah, 100%. And there's also something to consider in terms of, when I say building, it's because we all have like real deadlines, real issues. Like I have clients who are like ready to give me more money for a higher subscription level to get more and better data. So I'm like, I'm that close. I need to get that. So I don't really care about it being too precise or having clean code. So I think everyone can relate, having deadlines at work. There's things that just need to be delivered. And as we get better tools, we kind of try to fill as much our time with as much as we can and try and build more and more. Like, if you have 3 hours a day to work, you can do this much work. But if you have got 10 hours a day, you're still gonna find more work to do and trying to build more things. There's never enough. So I think with AI now, we've got to a level where we can do 10 times probably as much coding. So we kind of expect that to happen and we require that from the LLMs. But I think everyone just got a little bit overexcited about it because the first iteration, the first little feature, the first autocomplete is like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is like reading my mind. So you kind of get duped into it a little bit. And then you just assume, okay, if this is the output for this one feature, I'm just assuming that everything else from now on is going to be as good. And that's where the problems start to show, I think.
And I think this is like this line of like, you feel like you're close and then you keep finding more and more issues that sets me back for days. This is the difference between 10x code output and 10x productivity. Because productivity is like progress towards the end goal measured by like you're getting closer to the end goal, like how much closer and how much faster. So if you get, 10x the code output, maybe that gets you 10x closer to your goal, but maybe it means that you've got a bunch of code, but actually there are these problems, and by the time you fix all the problems, maybe it took you longer to reach the goal than than like it would have if you just sat down and done it from scratch. I'm not saying that's always the case, but the point is that, like you said, you can feel duped like by the amount of
Yeah.
code that's coming out, and it's in the examples you're trying, it's working. So why wouldn't it, work in all the cases? Um, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely like this all resonates with me a lot. These are all experiences I've had, and I had to learn from them, and it sounds like you also learned from them. So
Yeah.
why don't we talk specifically about like you did this coding review session. You're like, okay, turn off all the AI stuff. Let me just look at all the code that I've got here and let me just like understand it. And you were horrified. Let's talk specifically about like what kinds of things did you see? Like what in this code base would you have never written yourself, or even somebody who was like a junior engineer new to programming would have done?
Yeah, sure. So there's an example of two services that are meant to do a very similar thing. One is called like account service, the other is called sound service, and
Right.
they both have one parameter that's like a third party API provider. And like in one file is called third party API, in the other file is called third party provider. And these small things, but like this is meant to be the same parameter. And if this small property is going to be called in a different way at this level, when everybody, any junior dev will understand this is doing the same thing, it should be called the same way, then
Right.
it becomes really, really hard to maintain, 6 months time when you're like, why there's like 10 different variables representing the same thing. And this is not going to break the code, but it's going to break, my brain when I try to review it and to fix it and to upgrade it. So that's one thing. Another thing I've really found frustrating is the redeclaration of code. I think I've seen you talked about this in previous live streams as well. It's something that I don't think it's fully fixed. Yeah, I saw, for example, the same Redis configuration being redeclared like 4 or 5 different times across different services with different parameters, used calling the same variable from different files. And maybe there's a reason that some developer would want to do it, but I was quite specific even with my prompting. I want everything to be as streamlined as possible. If you're grabbing an env variable into a Go file, do it once, and then everything else you just get from that Go file. You shouldn't like go and try and parse the variable again. So yeah, those are the main things. Also, like the file kind of pollution of seeing a lot of files, especially when you need to do quick testing. Like, okay, I build this. I need like to test if this is actually working. Now let's do like an example. So you create loads and loads of Go files inside this folder, and then inside this subfolder, inside like 2 levels down, all trying to do the same thing. And then at the end of it, it wouldn't clean them up. So then at the end of the day, you've left with like, I don't know, 25 files, and only 5 are the ones that you actually needed. And the other 20, you
Right.
have to go in and tell it, please try to clean it up. And I've tried to do this actually in preparation for the live stream. I was like, okay, can you actually recognize what's needed and what not? And it still doesn't recognize all of the files that are bloated. So yeah, I think this, if you're trying to maintain a repository over time, this becomes a really big issue.
Yeah, some of the cases of that I would have guessed are like, okay, so the models have limited context windows. Once your code base gets past a certain size, which is a pretty small size, like you just can't fit the whole code base in its context window. So of course, the model has to like jump around and just selectively try to figure out which pieces of code it needs to bring in for context. Based on that, it's only natural that it would make sense that it's like, well, if it didn't happen to bring in, Web API provider, it might decide to make a new one called Web API or something like that. But I've seen it happen even when I know it's in the context. It's like about this thing that already does what you want. You just choose not to use it for whatever reason. The most extreme example was where like it was literally one conditional, and it was like if, and then inside the if it did a bunch of stuff, and then else like right below it, and then the model itself wrote the if and the else. Like inside the else was like 100% code duplication with the same chunk of stuff that happened inside the if. I'm like, what are you doing? Pull out a function and call it from both branches, like under different circumstances. Like, um, so it's not just like, oh, well, we just need to manage context better. It's like, no, sometimes the model just decides that code duplication is the right thing, or like maybe with slightly different names or something like that. And the other thing that you mentioned about like it generates a bunch of files that like don't follow the same conventions or something like that. And then like asking it to clean it up, it often messes it up. I've also seen that happen where it's like you have all of your test files organized a certain way, and then it just goes off and makes a whole brand new file that has like a totally different like testing style to it. And it's like, oh, well, we'll just like hook that in with the original test. It's like, no, follow the same style as the other. What are you doing? And I love
Yeah.
this metaphor. Like, it's like I'd asked 10 junior to mid-level developers to work on this code bait with no Git access, locking them in a room without seeing what the other 9 were doing. Um, I totally get that feeling. Like sometimes it's like it's the same model, it's the same programmer, it's the same prompts, and yet you get like totally different outcomes as if they weren't even talking to each other. And I think this is one of the reasons that a lot of the metaphors that I hear people throw around about AI agents just kind of fall flat for me. Like people are like, "Oh, it's like a junior engineer." I'm like, I've worked with a lot of junior engineers in my career, and it's not like that. They're different in both that they don't make the same mistakes, and also in that like if you coach a junior engineer, like help them out, like they remember what you taught them, and then also like at the same time, the LLMs have this encyclopedic knowledge of like really obscure libraries and frameworks and stuff like that, and techniques, so they can often like build a whole parser from scratch being asked. Like a junior engineer can't do that. So there's enough differences there that I feel like just saying LLMs are like junior engineers, but fill in the blank. I don't know. It doesn't really work for me because the failure
Yeah.
modes are just, there's enough of them. There's enough that are very different that, yeah, something like this makes more sense to me. It's like, yeah, I see in this case why it's like that, but I wouldn't extrapolate from that. It's like, oh, therefore, Claude is like a junior engineer.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. And you also mentioned like, okay, I was feeding context to them, lots of it, mostly using Gemini for its larger context window. So this would have been, I assume, Claude 3.7 Sonnet and Gemini 2.5 Pro. Is that right?
Yes, I think at
Yeah.
some point 3.7 came out throughout this process. I switched to it from
Okay.
3.5, and then yeah, I was using 2.5 Pro, and I was using as well ChatGPT or 3
Yeah.
Mini.
Gemini, it's a little bit frustrating to try to talk about it because they came out with 2.5 Pro in this like early preview state, and they've changed it a bunch, but they haven't changed the version number. So like when you
Yeah,
talk about 2.5 Pro, you almost have to go another level and say like, okay, but like what month was this
yeah,
2.5
that
Pro? Because they
doesn't
kept
help with
releasing
the
updates.
with the collective insanity we're going through. Is like, are we even talking about the same thing?
Right, right. Yeah. At any rate, okay. So this was like where you ended up and you were like, okay, this thing made a huge mess of my code base. I'm going to stop using the AI and just review it. The review is that it's a horror show. What do you do next at that point?
Yeah, so I thought, let's just go back to what I would have done without AI. So like
Hmm.
taking pen and paper, try to map this thing out, and also trying to rewrite this code from a point of knowledge. So I also try to educate myself a little bit more. Let's try to learn actually what are the Go best practices myself before having the code right, or before even asking the LLM to tell me what they are. Even research around, like watch some YouTube videos of trying to kind of understand a little bit more. So at least I could have some level of understanding, is this actually right or not? And this, I think, it's a good wider point, like trying to use the LLM to upskill yourself. Maybe we can talk about it a bit more later, like a huge upside, I think, where they should be considered more. So yeah, I got to the point where I just stopped giving it big features and big tasks to build, and I just reviewed everything, took a step back, and tried to rebuild little by little. And if I completely like lost all my trust in LLM, so I wouldn't give it again a big feature. I will like do very small things like refactoring or like a very small scope feature, and that kind of made me feel better about my code as well. I started to have more ownership over it, and I started to see a way forward. And I started also fixing the bugs, because as soon as you understand it, you have 100% understanding over your code base, what everything is doing. It's so much easier and quicker for you to go in and fix something and understanding, and also giving the LLM interaction on, please help me with this. But coming from a place, I think this is the biggest difference, like a mental shift. Like I am the software engineer, the senior software engineer. I am the architect. The LLM is like the assistant. The
Hmm.
assistant responds to me. I make the plan. I think that's where everyone got a bit overexcited, thinking AI is great. Let's just give it the keys to the building and let's just let it plan and do everything. I think we're not there yet. We're just a level below.
Yeah, and I should note that, one of the themes here is that if you try something with a different model, you try something with a different task, you try something with a different programmer driving the model, there's all these different variables that go into what your experience is. And this is your experience. A lot of this resonates with me. Like these are experiences I've had. At the same time, I'm also using large language models all the time now and like for various different tasks, but the way that I use them is pretty different than what I tried to do in this scenario. But at the same time, I'm also aware of people who do to use it for everything, including the architecture. But it's like they'll have like a more hands-on kind of collaborative approach to the architecture. At least this is from what I'm hearing. I haven't actually like watched someone over their shoulder when they do it, but to hear them describe it, it sounds like they're talking with the LLM to come up with an architecture plan, refining that, then having that plan, feeding that to another LLM and having it like, okay, go down and break down the tasks and so forth. So that's not to say that like, your approach was like right or wrong, but rather that like different people are having different experiences and also on different projects. So maybe with your project with Go and ClickHouse and the particular needs of your project, that's different than somebody else who's working on a React and TypeScript project, for example. Or me 100%. Doing a compiler in Zig or a blazing fast code editor in Rust, Okay, cool. So you did mention that like you're still using LLMs, but for like more tactical things, like just like rename this or like here's some pseudocode, give me the Go equivalent. Another thing that resonated with me is you said like, debugging became easier. Maybe I'm not as fast, but I don't have this weird feeling of I kind of wrote this code, but I actually have no idea what's in it. And then you also mentioned like I've not been using my brain as much when I'm like using LLMs. And this is also something that really resonated with me in like some of the ways that I've done it. And I'm not sure exactly how to put my finger on this, but I'm curious if this resonates with you too. But it almost seems like I have a choice of how much I'm using my brain when I'm doing AI stuff. It's really easy to think like, oh, just say, sudo go make me the code, like just make the thing happen and just kind of like close my eyes and just like wait until I get the notification that it's done. That's definitely feels like, okay, I'm not using my brain very much for this. And that leads, at least in my experience, to those giant messes, the horror shows that you talked about, where like you can never quite get it over the finish line. And if you look at the codes, it's a disaster area. But I've also found that I can choose to be much more engaged with it and be like more like, okay, you wrote the code, you got it to this point, all right, let me stop and take a look at it and like try to course correct early rather than later. And like every step of the way be inspecting its output and being like, okay, wait a minute, this approach doesn't look good, go do that. Or, I just realized something looking at this sort of rough draft you generated for me. And I'm curious if like, I guess we'll talk about, what your experience has been after this blog post, but let's just keep going with this. I also like, you mentioned that since you started to try out AI for all these things, you'd been using pen and paper less than you previously had. And I really like this because I know that there's been some research in like when people are taking notes with pen and paper versus when they're even typing notes. Apparently there's like, I don't know, some I'm really hand waving the research here, but it's like learning seems to work better with pen and paper for whatever reasons, like the pathways in your brain, just it's the way they work. I'd love to just talk about pen and paper a little bit and how you've used it before and like what your experience was sort of going back to that more.
Yeah, I've been on and off with pen and paper because being a tech enthusiast, I always have like the latest to-do app and all of that. But as I kind of grew up and I matured into my role, I found that having actual like notepad on the side of my desk, it's really helpful. Yeah, I know about the science behind it, but still like I can't really put in words why, but there's something about it. Even for a to-do list, I've got a very small notepad, like it's really small for a purpose. Well, I write like 3-4 things for the week, and it's just there. So whenever I get distracted, whether I don't know what's my North Star for the week, I just look at it and I know that those are the 4 things. So it's not a big project with a million subtasks. So I really like pen and paper for that, and especially for planning out features and architecture. There's something about the visual aspect of it. I might like sketch out an onboarding flow for a client, let's say, and putting it there on paper. There's something about it that makes it so much easier to understand, even more than trying to do diagrams online or using notepads online. So I think that's something that, as archaic as it might sound, is still very useful and important. And that also I think feeds into kind of using the brain more. And that's something that I was worried about. That I've been worried, I still am worried about, to be honest, as I was writing in a blog post.
Yeah. Yeah, I like you talked about here. This part was really interesting to me because it's pretty different from my default use of AI. So you talked about like defaulting to pen and paper. I've never been a pen and paper guy personally, but or at least not since I don't know, like 30 years ago or something. Um, defaulting to coding the first draft of that function on my own, and then use an LLM to check if it's a good solution, etc. I'm the other way around, where I sort of like default to generating a rough. I like to call it like rough draft generator. That's like my main use of
Mm.
AI tools, and then I will just go through and just absolutely rip it apart, and like I'll rewrite a bunch of it by hand, or like do the things that you're talking about, like here, like, oh, rewrite this thing. This thing is using the wrong technique. Go use, this other strategy. This is going to be have terrible performance or something. And then yeah, I do sometimes go out and ask a generic question like, hey, are there any edge cases the tests aren't covering and things like that. But it's interesting that you're sort of going back to the foundational thing that helps you get a really strong mental model of the problem, and then using the LLM to sort of like more tactically like enhance that.
Yeah, and of course, this is just my experience, and
Oh yeah.
for the same reason that there's a million to do apps because everyone's brain works in a different way. I'm sure many other people, like your workflow is different, and then
Yeah.
I think there's no right or wrong answer, but there is something about understanding at the core level what you're doing that is really important. Yeah, that's why I've write the first draft of the function myself. And I think also a reason for that is that coming from PHP and writing into a language I didn't know, sometimes it's really useful to tell the AI after you've written the function, this is how I will do this in PHP. How do you do this in Go? So, and this is another way that you can learn this new language while also achieving what you're trying to do and build the product that you were trying to build. So I think there's a double win in there.
Yeah. Something I've said for many years because I'm really into programming languages is like, there's one thing I've learned, it's that programmers have preferences. Like what works for one person might not work for another person and vice versa. And so like it's, it shouldn't be surprising, I guess, that like two different programmers might have totally different preferences in terms of like how they want to use this tool, like what things they want to use it for, how much they want to use it, etc. That seems like the most reasonable thing in the world. It's kind of weird how contentious these things are. Like, people get in arguments about them, but like to me, it's much more reasonable to say like, cool, like you found something that works for you, and you're like getting value out of the AI in a different way than I am, and that's fine. Like, it's not like one
Yeah.
of us is like objectively right or wrong. It's like we're both like exploring the space and figuring out what is most helpful to us, and that seems reasonable to me. Um, so you kind of wrapped up the blog post, and we'll kind of talk about like what you've done since then, because new models have come out, etc. You mentioned like after you've changed this approach, you're not frustrated with them anymore. You have once again very low expectations. So when they do something well, it's nice surprise. I definitely know how that means, how that feels. Trying to be smart about how you use them, love it. Great tool for learning by example. Also love that. I mean, you mentioned it was really helpful for you to learn Go by sort of like example, like while you were building
Yeah.
this new tool. I talked about this in some previous, I think it was on the changelog or something, about how like, yeah, I think like learning new languages is actually like AI assistants give you this new way to learn a new language that we didn't have access to before, where it's like you write the program that I want, I'll look at the code and pick up the language as like by reading code that was written just for me for solving this problem. Couldn't do that in the past, but now you can.
Yeah.
It's a new way to potentially
Yeah,
learn
it's
if that's how
amazing.
you want to learn. Um, and then yeah, you're learning Go, upskilling yourself, and applying this new knowledge when you code. Um, cool. Okay, so I think in order to just keep an eye on the clock, I want to make sure we have time to talk about the other stuff about like what you have done since then. So why don't we switch gears? You took the time to follow up on this, which I love, and I really appreciate that you took the time to do this. And you sort of like diagrammed out like in more detail. Here's what the problem was, and you went back and actually tried to resolve the same problem that you got stuck on, that you ended up with the horror show on, except with modern models, so like Claude 4 Opus, which did not exist at the time that you were originally trying this, and also just based on all of the learnings that you've had, and like so, you've gotten better as a programmer, and you've gotten more experience with these tools. The tools have gotten better. So let's talk about the follow-up. Like, how did
Yeah.
it go trying to sort of like go back and revisit this problem with the benefit of all your experience and the new models and new tools and all that?
Yeah, so I can definitely say that the models have improved, and Opus 4 was a great improvement. And I put some examples in the craft document. A few of those, as you can see in the models highlighted, it doesn't include Opus 4 anymore because, for example, with the redeclaration of configs, that didn't happen anymore. I thought it was much better at it, and it was much better at keeping the variable names, for example, something I was complaining about earlier. So at the beginning, it looked great, and it's funny because you always fall into this as you try a new model, you fall into like this pitfall of thinking, oh, this is solving everything. This new model is just like this solution. This is amazing. Because I was like, oh my God, maybe this is all solved now. But then as I kind of prompted it more and as I poked enough into it, I started seeing that some issues were there. So for example, as you can see the diagram after that one, if you scroll down where I talk about, that one about the understanding the dependencies. For example, I have that service provider in there. I'm calling a third-party API just in some cases, and this third-party API has got a limit. I can hit it only 600 times per minute. So I need to make sure on my end, I want to kind of max that out because I want to get as much data as possible, but also don't want to get 4 to 9s all the time because that's just a waste of everyone's time. So I try to have AI to build a internal kind of rate limiter. I don't know if there's a more appropriate name for it, but kind of almost like throttling my calls to it, and it did. But then I built it and I put it live, and I started seeing, okay, instead of doing like 2,000 calls a minute, it's doing like 150. So like now I've got the opposite problem. So what's going on there? As I dig into the code, I see, okay, it's put a rate limiter at the top level, but also it went inside one specific function and it put a very similar rate limiter. So now I'm like throttling myself twice. And that's just, 2-3 levels of a function calling each other. So it's not like a super complicated flow, but it's still, and this happened with Opus 4 as well. So it's not something that's being fixed. It's very frustrating because again, I had to go there and look into this, and I don't have experience with Redis at this level to understand this. I still haven't fixed this issue actually. So during the week I will have to start from scratch again and write it from scratch. And so it's easy to fall into this again and think, okay, AI can do this. But as soon as I give it enough freedom, it just starts to mess things up. So that's why you have to be very strict and very, very good, I think, at like resisting the urge, just give AI, free reign over your code and just trying to you be patient because it might be quicker in the next 10 minutes. You may have 90% of what you need, but then it might take 3 hours to fix the rest. So but if you instead if you take like half an hour to understand fully, learn a little bit more, then it really leverages your knowledge as well. And I think that's the kind of the solution.
Yeah, I love that specific example because something I've heard people say, which I don't agree with, is they say like the new models just keep getting exponentially better and better. And to me, it feels like the opposite of that. It feels more like diminishing returns, because when I look at the quality of the code that Sonnet 4 and Opus 4 come out with compared to Sonnet 3.7, which I had a lot of experience with before, to me, it seems like it's the quality of the code overall, like when it's working right and when it's like not hitting one of these weird edge cases like it does massive code duplication or something like that, it feels about the same to me. I can't really notice a significant difference in code quality. The main thing I notice is that these really, really terrible failure modes are happening less often. Like it sounds like you didn't see the thing where it like completely duplicated the code of 2 different things and just gave them different names, or at least you saw less of that. But you still had this horrible bug where it was like, oh, I applied the rate limit in multiple times, but maybe that horrible bug didn't come up in 3.7. So it's like the percentage, the percentage of the time that it does something really, really silly like that again, like a junior engineer, I would never expect a junior engineer to like apply a rate limit twice. You have to do more work to do that. You have to go out of your way to make that mistake almost. But at the same time, it's like, it is better. It's like it sounds like you had an overall better experience this time around than you did last time. Is that fair? Or
100%. But you're so right about the like base core intelligence of the model. And I mean, I might be wrong. I mean, maybe tomorrow there's a new model, that does everything, and I might look like a fool. But like as of now, it just feels like they've gotten better at giving examples of what not to do. So the core intelligence, it's kind of the same, hasn't changed much, but then they're putting more boundaries around it. So it knows where to go and it's more structuring in the way that it acts. But when you actually go into the core way, it makes such obvious and stupid mistakes that you can't you can't believe that the intelligence has got better. And you can see the same with like Mid-Journey from V1 to V2 to V3. It was amazing, it was different. Yeah, there's incredible difference. And then now as you shift from like V6 to V7, it might look like 5% better, but it's diminishing returns. So maybe that's just something inherent about the way that these are built. And maybe I've seen talks about diffusion-based models. Maybe that's something, we need a new paradigm that changes everything. So yeah, I don't really know because I'm not an expert in machine learning. So I have no idea on that side. But the feeling of somebody who uses this every day is that we kind of reached to a level where you can only put more boundaries about like an existing core intelligence that's not really improving that much.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me too. But yeah, like you said, I mean, there's always breakthroughs. Who knows if one's going to happen here? But yeah, at least that seems to be the trend that I've observed over the last ever since like Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Like that seems to be the trend. Okay, so let's keep going through this.
Yeah.
I'll let you sort of drive this section. Like just kind of I don't know, what do you want to talk through in terms of your experience? Because there's a lot of different code snippets and stuff in here. Like, what do you think's the most interesting to talk through based on what we've talked through so far?
I've just wanted to give another couple examples since they're there on things that it does wrong still to this day is, for example, something that I see a lot is leaving legacy functions. There's one there further down, and that it renames something just because I've asked it to change the config structure, and then it will rename a function, put legacy at the end of it, but it will keep it there. So there's a lot of like legacy function in the code base that definitely I do not need anymore. So yeah, that's example one, and example two is the function I'm talking about right now. So it's it's very frustrating because then it starts polluting your code base again with things that you don't need. And clearly I don't need this still in the code base. Just I'm on Git, I can always go back to it. Sometimes I've even seen it comment things out and say we don't need this anymore, just like comment everything out, like not even deleting the code. So like that's such a basic level of getting things wrong. And another one is the one that we're seeing right now is common structures. For example, in this case, that third-party API that I'm using, I get two methods. One gives me a sound, another gives me videos, but inside the account videos, its videos has got sound attached to it. So as a developer, I want the same structure to represent the same object that I get back from the API, so I can debug and test better. I can map it out. I don't need to map it out every single time in a different way. But it gives me two different, as you can see on the right, called one
Slightly
sound
different,
details,
right.
yeah, sound info, and you can see like clearly as a human, you can see okay, that's the same object. Sometimes it's got some feature, but can always
Right.
default to null or to empty, But no, the API decides to call it. I mean, the LLM decides to call it, sound details or sound info, and then yeah, if you end up working in the agentic or vibe coding way, these things you can never catch them because if you're not reviewing the code, these things start to accumulate, and then you find yourself in a code base with 10 different definitions of the same object. Yeah, good luck trying to
Right.
debug that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay. And then you also talked about sort of like the incomplete thing where you're like, hey, I wrote out all the bullet points of like what I wanted it to do, but it didn't quite complete all of them. I have heard people talk about solving this problem by breaking them out into separate conversation threads. So you say like instead of giving it everything in one prompt, you say like, okay, here's my background, here's just the first bullet point. Just go do that. Okay, then it's done with that. All right, new conversation, right? Just the second bullet point. And that has its own trade-offs compared to this. Like on the one hand, that can mean that you can be a lot more confident that it's going to do all of them because one of those conversations is like, here's the one thing I want you to do. So it's not going to forget that one thing. But now you don't have the context of all the previous conversations, which means that you're more likely to get the 10 junior engineers working without seeing what each other are doing problems. So it's not like there's a free lunch here. And it's like, oh, you just do that technique and you solve this problem. It's like, well, maybe, but then you might also introduce a different problem.
Yeah, 100%. And this case, like this specific one, it wasn't even that big of a feature because I was mindful of that. So I tried to give it like 2 or 3 instructions, and one of those was like, please, if from this example, like copy, can you also put this in the config file? And it didn't.
Right.
So yeah, that was also a bit frustrating.
Gotcha. Okay, so then we also have the ever-present hallucination problem.
Yeah, this was with the previous model. I haven't tried with Opus, but yeah, it's got my old schema, so it knows everything. It knows exactly the list of every single database table and column I have, but it still gives me the name of a table that it doesn't exist, and it still say, oh, actually, but if you're on ClickHouse, which we've been talking about being on ClickHouse for like 6 months, and you still being, oh, actually, but try this. But if you're not on MySQL, if you're on ClickHouse, you should try this other thing. And it's really frustrating because it makes you question, like, oh, I've been chatting to you for an hour. Have you been assuming the wrong thing all along?
Yeah. Well, I think honestly the biggest thing that's helped with hallucinations is, in my experience, has just been like AI agents in general and giving them access to things like your database schema and like your compiler so they can get like type mismatches and stuff. So it's like that's addressing the symptom rather than the root cause, because there doesn't seem to be a way to address the root cause. Like
Yeah.
they just hallucinate. That's just a thing that they do, but you can sort of minimize the damage or let them like self-recover from those hallucinations by saying like, oh, oops, I hallucinated this table name, and then when I tried to build it, I got an error because it wasn't in the schema. But yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like, of all the things, of all the ways that models have improved, it seems like hallucinations are still just a fundamental, just part of what you get when using large
Yeah.
language
Yeah.
models.
Yeah. 100%.
Um,
Yeah.
Okay, so then this one is just sort of like, yeah, I've also seen this one where it's like just weird like lack of naming conventions where again, like, any human doing this, regardless of their level
Yeah.
of experience, would just like follow the naming conventions.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully I've seen with Opus this it's not happening as much anymore. So hopefully that's fixed. As again, also this Redis config issue. So that was a good side to see. Okay, they are improving in some way.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, why don't we just wrap up by just talking about sort of like, where have you decided to go from here? Like you've had this experience, decided I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to try to consciously use my brain more, use pen and paper more, go back to the strategies that I used in the past. I'm the architect. I'm in charge of figuring out what to do with the code, and I'm just going to use the LLM more tactically to help me like write individual chunks of code more quickly or in a language I'm unfamiliar with. Then you went back and redid all that, very, very kindly, just for science to try to see how things had improved. Where have you ended up on this? Like what do you think is the best way for you, Alberto, to use AI, and like to what extent and in what ways, sort of going forward?
So I think there's different cases. It goes by project and by feature. And there's a section in there saying, sometimes it's okay to one shot. And I still believe it. Like I have used this. There's an example in there of a V0, a little app that I built because I needed a specific retrofit for a function I was trying to see and visualize. And I gave it literally one shot, like one prompt with the screenshot of a Google Sheet, and it built this amazing spreadsheet with a little 2D thing I could move around. It was great. So, but I didn't need that tool to live for many years. I just needed this specific thing at one time. And so there's cases where if it's small enough, if you don't need to maintain this project, or if it's something that you just need very quickly, you don't care about the code quality, yeah, like one-shotting, vibe coding is great, and I still do it myself. But in all other cases, it's just a matter of being very diligent and trying to review every single thing that the code does, and also treating all the code that it outputs as disposable. So branching out every time you do everything, just like create a new branch and be ready to discard it and try again. And if it doesn't work, just go back and try to do a little bit more manually. For example, with unit testing, it's horrible at trying to make, like, if you start with a repository, there's no testing at all. I've tried it because I'm not great at testing. I wanted to start doing it, and I asked the LLM to build it, and it creates so much mess. But then actually I went back and learned how do you write a unit test in this scenario, and I wrote one, and then as soon as I wrote one, it was so much better, because then he knows the patterns, he knows what he needs to do. And so yeah, I think that's that base level of patience and human intervention builds such a great foundation for the application to be able to go, and become a big, solid, production-ready application. So I think that's the best thing. And also on a wider scale, I try to be very mindful and think. I hope that's what people get, something that people get from this live stream as well, is try not to fall into the hype, because there's a lot of people that have tried to, get followers or make money trying to sell things. But actually, if you don't have the experience of, oh, this is not working for me, it's not your fault. It's not like you're trying to use the tools wrong. I mean, maybe, you could do things better, but I think there's a lot of like gaslighting around of people saying, oh, actually, you're not using context 7 MCP, so that's why you didn't work for you. And well, maybe that you didn't do this. So I think if you're confident enough in your skills, a mid senior developer, and this is not working from you, that's nothing wrong with you. Just try to do the things that you always did and use AI just to like leverage a little bit your knowledge. But see that's what I'm trying to do, because every time a new model comes, it's so easy to think this is the new solution, this is great, and there's a lot of FOMO around, I think, as well. Oh, I haven't tried Claude Code yet. So, and I've seen people already last week saying Claude Code is so much better than Cursor, like not even a comparison. So I'm like, okay, I'll stop using Cursor. I started using Claude Code. Great for 10 minutes, then same issues. So yeah, I think let's just try to kind of calm down all this hype and find a balanced way towards AI and use it, because I think it's just such an amazing revolution in technology, but we're not there yet. So I think if you scroll down, there's another diagram I did. I think that's my main point, not that one, the one below as well. That one, the ladder of abstraction. I think where we are right now, I think, is on the left side, which is we are doing human work for some of the programming, but we need to do architectural, abstractions, and we need to do the decision for the product. Whereas before the LLMs came, we needed to write all the Java, Python, PHP, all the code. We needed to write it. We now have a technology that allows us to go up a level, and we don't need to write the code anymore, but we still need to do that, level 4, that purple in there of the architecture. But if you see on the top right, I put what the AI hype is selling. They're trying to sell us something that's not true, which is we haven't gone up 2 levels. We are not there yet where you can just say, I need to build an account and software management system for my client, do it, sub agents, N8N, whatever people are using, and it's ready by the morning and it's great, it's perfect. It's just not there yet. Unfortunately, yeah. I wish it was, because I wouldn't even be here. I would be on a beach, with my earnings from my 100 startups that I built. But we've gone up a level. It's great, but also let's be mindful we're not there yet at the next level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. Like, I definitely have heard the oh yeah, all you need to do, everybody's just a product manager now, and then nobody needs to think about code at all. It's just all about English. And yeah, if you're trying to build high quality stuff, that has not been my experience at all. We're not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Alberto, thank you so much for taking the time to talk through all this with me. I think this is a really great perspective to hear. And also, I just love the fact that you're so introspective about all this. And a lot of people, are I don't know, have FOMO and are trying to board the hype train. And like you said, convince you of everything. I remember as you're talking, I was just thinking of this YouTube thumbnail I remember seeing, and the YouTubers, was doing the shocked face, and then the caption was "We're cooked," and it was the release of Claude 3.7 Sonnet. It was 3.7 Sonnet, we're cooked.
Yeah.
Programmers we're done. That's it. Game over.
No, we're not done. Yeah, there's there's clients that still
yeah.
There's clients that are still using FTP to upload files into the website. There's still it's a very wide world, and there's a lot of different needs. So I think developers are still here to stay for a while.
And this is great perspective to have, because, like you said, it's not like the tools are useless. You're managing to get value out of the tools, but the way that you get value out of it might be different than the way I get value out of it. And that's fine. That's the way it's always been. Programmers have always used different tools in different ways that work best for them. And yeah, there's overhype, and then there's over skepticism. And I just love that you have this really great ability to be honest and take stock and do experiments and try things out, and not get carried away by excessive hype or excessive cynicism, and just figure out what works for you. And that's, to me, the main message of all of what you've been saying is just people should figure out what works for them and be self-honest about what's helping and what's hurting.
Yeah, thanks, and I appreciate that you guys are giving space also to these voices that are not just saying, oh, AI is next, we're doomed, let's pack it up, but also some different views. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, we're trying to figure out the whole picture, and this is part of it. So thank you so much, and thanks to everybody who tuned in, and hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.
Thank you.